headphones, I was in big trouble. So we're looking at today a couple of deeper features in MusicMaster, gold recycling, and a little later on we'll look at auto-platooning in depth. And I'm going to start out by giving you a little background on the theory of gold recycling. What happened back in the day was somebody got the idea that we're playing the records that we play overnight in our gold categories. These are categories that the songs only play once every blue moon, like once every say 15 days or once every month and a half. When they play in the overnight period, hardly anybody hears them because the audience falls off dramatically overnight, and we're essentially wasting a play of that record. And the idea was, well, let's take the songs that played overnight and let's mix those in during the following day and later in the day, so that we don't lose that play. The songs still get played, and in the benefit of that, another benefit of that is we won't be using records from our regular rotation during the daytime quite as often. So the rotation for the audience that's listening during the peak times of day will appear to be slower. It'll basically, they'll get a chance to hear every song we play and not missing the ones that played in the overnight period. And this was a good theory. So if we look at, let's go into MusicMaster here and do a turnover analysis on this. And today we're going to be looking at a demo library that's very large. It has a lot of songs, thousands of songs. Gold recycling and auto-platooning, for that matter, work best on large rotation, slow rotation, large library databases, although I have seen them solve problems in even tight rotation CHR formats that are only playing a few hundred records. But today we're going to look at this large database, and we're going to see that if we go to the C1 category, Earth, and the turnover analysis, we see that our turnover is about 60 days for this category, which is a couple of months. It means that any song that's in C1 is only going to be heard once a month, and if that song is rotating through all the day parts properly, and let's say we have 5 different day parts, in MusicMaster we call them shifts, that means that if you only listen to the station in midday while you're at work, you're probably going to hear a particular C1 come up only 1/5 as often as it plays on the radio station, because it's going to be playing hopefully in all the other shifts. So during midday, instead of a 60-day turnover for each song, we're actually looking at almost a year before you hear the song repeat. Ridiculously long turnover time, especially if you've gone through all the trouble of testing these songs and making sure that you've got the really best songs on the air. So if a song from this category ends up falling into the night shift when hardly anybody's listening, it might be a good idea to bring that song into another part of the day and play that song again. And so we use gold recycling to do that. Let's go into the gold recycling setup screen. Basically, we'll go to Dataset, Schedule, and then Gold Recycle, which is down here near the bottom of the list. This is the Gold Recycle setup grid. Now, you have to decide which categories that you want to recycle, and you do that by pulling down this box and selecting a category. You can program the recycling across multiple categories. But what's interesting in MusicMaster is you can program the recycling differently in different categories. You can make it the same, or you can make it different. And I'm going to show you how to set one up. We're going to take that C category, and this is the one that rotates in 60 days. And what we're going to do is set up a recycle period here. And the basic one that we talked about, which is, let's take the songs from overnight. You click on the little green recycle icon to create a recycle period. And so what we're going to do here is say, let's take the songs from midnight, and we're going to take them from, let's say, the midnight hour, the 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3. We're going to take about 4 hours worth of them. So that would be midnight, 1, 2, 3 a.m. hours. In fact, let's go one more and take it till right up till 5 a.m. So what this is the pickup period, which basically means that during this period we're going to be taking songs that play in this period, and we're going to pick those up and reuse them somewhere else. And the place where we reuse them is called the drop-off period. So we're going to drop them off later in the day. And we're going to wait until morning drive is over. So we'll drop them off in 10 a.m. And since we have 5 hours of music, we're going to play them back in 5 hours. And we have a recycle attitude here, which we'll talk about in a minute. If we click OK, we basically see that we have set up the recycle period for Tuesday. And that basically is pick up the songs from C for the 5 hours of overnight and drop them into the 5 hours in midday. And in order to complete this, we would go through and create recycle periods that are exactly the same as this. They could be different, but we'll basically create recycle periods that are the same, and we would do this for every day of the week where we want the recycling to happen. So when we create another one, it looks like that. So if we edit the recycle period, we can see that we can copy this recycle period into another day. So I've just, by hitting copy, I've taken all my settings and I've just moved the day forward to Thursday, which makes it real easy to populate the entire week. If you want to do it, you just copy and it moves it down to the next row, next day. And my grid, by the way, starts on Tuesday because in the tools options you can set the first day of your broadcast week. And I have mine set to Tuesday. Yours probably starts with Sunday or Monday. You can change that in MusicMaster. So now we've got some recycle periods set up here. And what I want to do is talk a little bit about, we'd probably want to have one for Monday. I might not want to do it at all on the weekends. It's my choice. I can set this up any way I want for any category I want. But what I'm going to talk about is some of the things that were learned by programmers who used gold recycling in the early days, what the side effects are, and some of the pitfalls and things that can happen to you when you're using this. One of the things that was learned is that it's not usually a good idea to try to play back all the records that you picked up from overnight. In the daytime, you might end up having some artist conflicts, hour rotation conflicts, and things like that that basically bump these records around as they are attempting to reschedule in later in that same day. And so what we recommend and what people have learned over the years is that it's usually a good idea to take the playback period and make it a little smaller than the pickup period. So you're picking up basically more songs than you need from the overnight, and you're shuffling them back in to the mix in somewhere in midday, and you're doing this in a way that allows you to have more than enough music to recycle into those few hours, and then after that you go back to the regular rotation. That's one thing that was learned. We also learned one of the obvious things is that if we're using recycling, we are slowing down the rotation of the entire category in effect, because we are reusing records during these 3 hours instead of using records from the normal stack, the normal rotation. And so we're giving the stack a little rest for 3 hours here, which basically means that it will take longer for us to get through the entire category, and therefore each song in the category will rest longer before it plays. So this is a way of kind of stretching out the rotation of a category, making it appear to be bigger than it really is. Another side effect that people discovered, and this is an interesting one because it's based on what normal listener habits are. Most people, I know there's exceptions to this rule, but most people sleep at night. And so if someone falls asleep, goes to bed and has their clock radio on before they fall asleep, and they were listening to music up until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and they heard a couple of songs that you were playing, then they fall asleep and they wake up and They go to work, and as soon as they get to work and they're listening to the radio, they hear the same songs they played just before they went to sleep last night, because you're recycling from overnight into midday. And to them, because going to sleep was basically like 8 hours edited out of their lives, it basically doesn't feel like 10 hours have gone by. It feels like 2 hours have gone by, and you're repeating the song that you just played 2 hours ago. And remember, this is a song that's normally not heard for a couple of months. So to correct that situation, let's take out all of the recycle periods. You just click the little X icon, and we can clear all the recycle periods. Let's create a new one that solves that problem. What we're going to do is pick up from Tuesday, only we're going to take songs from midday, starting about 10 a.m., and we'll take 5 hours worth from there. But we're going to drop them off, play them back, if you will, replay them, in the overnight on the following day. And so what we'll do is put these into, we'll take about 6 hours worth from midday. That'll be the 10 o'clock, 11, 12, 1, 2, and 3 o'clock hours. So we kind of stop at 4, and then we'll drop them off from midnight, 1, 2, and 3 a.m., stopping at 4 a.m. And basically, this gives us a pattern that looks like this. Now we've completely solved the problem of someone hearing the song and then hearing it what to them seems like 2 hours later. So now if you want to clone this down, you just edit, copy, and you'll see that MusicMaster now adds a day to each of these time periods, but it leaves all the other settings alone, so you can go in and quickly populate the grid. And once you have this set up the way you like, you might want to recycle other categories the same way. So if you have your recycle period set up in a way that you like, let's just continue filling this. We'll use copy to do it. And let's say that we're going to do this on this station every day of the week. Oh, we have a problem. What happened here? I have to hit copy again. Nope, doesn't work. So let's go over here and take a look at what's going on. We need to pick up from Saturday, and we want to put it back in on Sunday. And okay. Now we're going to take this one, edit it, and copy. And now we have this basically happening now every day. And I believe we need to do one more if we're going to actually do all 7 days. So let's try and do that. Go to copy. And now it's filled in. So now every day of the week we're taking music from the midday for 6 hours and replaying that music in the overnight. Now how is it replayed? That's an interesting question, because there's options on how this is replayed. Now if you imagine that the music in this category is in a card file, and you have the cards in the front are the ones the scheduler is selecting from, the one that it's choosing to play on the air, and it's still testing the records to see if they pass all the rules. But there's one rule that it almost certainly can't pass. This is a 60-hour turnover or 60-day turnover category, and I may have a minimum rest rule set up that basically says these songs have to rest 40 days or 30 days or something like that. But if I'm trying to play those songs the very next day, that's less than 24 hours turnover. So what gold recycling automatically does for you is when you are playing the songs back during the overnight hours in this case, it automatically ignores any rules that you have for minimum rest, for minimum rotation for the song. If it is playing back a recycled song, it ignores any rest violations against the pickup period. So if the song played at 1 p.m. on Tuesday and now it's trying to play back at 2 a.m. on Wednesday, and it's part of what we call the recycle pool, it was records that were meant to be recycled, it's not tested for hour or minimum rest, I should say. It is tested for everything else. So the songs will not play back in the exact same order that they played in the midday the previous day, because what's going to happen is, let's say that you had a Beatles record, and this is an oldies database. Say you had a Beatles record that played at 10, but then you also played a Beatles record from your normal rotation at 11 p.m. That Beatles record probably would not be able to play right away in the first hour, even though it came from the first hour of the pickup period. It would have to wait a little while and maybe play in the second hour because of the conflict that it would have with artists against the Beatles record in 11 p.m. the previous day. So what you have is essentially you're taking all the cards from the songs that played from 10p to 3p, and you're setting those into a separate pile. And when you get to scheduling Wednesday, you are adding those cards temporarily to the front of the stack again. So the scheduler has those to look at, but it basically can pick them in any order it likes in order to satisfy your rules, just like it would if you weren't recycling. Now, there's some differences in the way that MusicMaster handles things as far as whether it should always use the recycled records or whether it can mix in songs that were not recycled when it's filling in this time period. Like suppose that none of the records that came from the recycle pool work here, and I'm trying to fill in a position. Should I leave the position unscheduled, or should I dig into the non-recycled records, the normal stack, and try to find something that works? This is basically set up in the recycle attitude. This has got 3 options. And by default it says schedule the best song recycled or not, which basically means that MusicMaster's free to look at the recycle pool, the ones that were picked up from the previous day. It's also free to look at non-recycled records and consider them together and say, out of all these, which is the best one to use? If you want to tighten that up a little bit and make sure that you play more recycled records than non-recycled records, you can go to the next option, which is a little tighter. And this is called schedule from the recycle pool if possible. And what that means is that we're only going to go to the non-recycled records, the normal stack, if we would have had to leave that position unscheduled. So rather than leaving it unscheduled, we'll fall back to using one that didn't come from the recycle pickup period. We're going to just go there if we have to, if possible. And then you have the third option, which is basically if you can't find one that came from the recycle pickup period, then leave the position unscheduled and I'll fill it in with something else, because I don't want anything to come from outside of the recycle pickup period during these hours. This is pretty extreme, and it is likely to give you some unscheduled positions, but if you're picking up more music than you need, so in this case we're getting 6 hours and we only need 4 hours, most of the time this will work. But there's really no harm then in going to this one that basically says, just in case, fall back and use something that wasn't recycled. And the odds are you won't see that happening until the very last hour or two of your playback period, when MusicMaster starts to run out of records from the recycle pool. It can only use them once during the recycle playback period, and so once it's used it's the available pool to use is getting smaller and smaller. And when it gets down to the last hour, it may only have a few hours worth of songs from that category to pull from. And let's say we play the C category, we call for that 4 times an hour. So we may get down to having 12 left to look at, or 8 left to look at when we get to the last hour. If all of those fail, artist separation or hour rotation or something like that, then we're gonna go to the stack and get a song that's not recycled. And but by default it uses the schedule the best song recycled or not, which means it's going to tend to play those recycled records, and but if they're not the best record to play, we're going to go and get something else instead. Okay, so this is the way that gold recycling is typically used by radio stations that use it. Another thing that you might do is you might say, well, I don't want to have the Saturday recycle period, so I can just click anywhere on the number 4 recycle period, which is the one that's picking up from Friday and dropping off in Saturday, and we say, this isn't important to me on weekends. I have a completely different strategy on weekends. So go to the recycle with an X icon and click that, and then you can do the same thing, let's say, for Sunday. We don't want to recycle on Sunday morning either. So now you've basically set up a recycle pattern that is weekdays only. And you might not want to take the stuff that played from Sunday midday. Might be a good idea to not recycle there either. So let's take that out. So here we have a 4-day out of the week recycle strategy. Now what we want to do is first of all, you'd want to save that, so that this work you've done is all being done in theory in MusicMaster. You're setting these up. They're not effective until you close this and save it and close. If you try to close and you've made changes in here and you forgot to save, MusicMaster will remind you and say, do you want to save the changes you've made? But if you save first, it won't ask you that. But let's say we want to apply the same strategy to another category. I want to apply it to the D category. Well, one of the things you can do is go to the icon that looks like two sheets of paper. It's basically the original and the copy is that icon. And that is copy recycle periods from this category. So we basically have copied those into a clipboard, MusicMaster's own clipboard. Now we can select a different category, like D Mars, and we can go back up here, and now we see that we've got a new icon. It looks like a clipboard with that copy laying on it. So this is paste recycle periods from another category. And what it means is we're going to be pasting what we just copied, which was all of the intricate patterns that we've set up for C. You click that, copy all recycle periods from category C1 Earth. Yes, that's what I want to do. And we bring in the same exact recycle pattern into this category. And I can actually go to another category and say, well, I want to do the same thing for my B category and just paste again because it's still in the clipboard. So now I've set up a very elaborate pattern across multiple categories. But let's say that on my B category, I want to do something different. You just go in here and make the changes to the recycle periods for this category. Each category can be set up differently in MusicMaster. So if we were to save this and close, there's nothing else you need to set up. There are no rules that have to be turned on. There's no rules that have to be adjusted. MusicMaster takes care of all that for you, and the recycling will begin just the way you've laid it out here, starting with your next auto scheduling session, and you'll start to see the songs recycle. So the terms here, just to keep you familiar with MusicMaster terminology, recycle pickup period, that's when we collect the songs to be replayed. Those songs are actually coming from the normal rotation. They're not recycled from anywhere. They're coming from the stack just like they normally would. But we're collecting them up and putting them into what we call the recycle pool. And that's like a bucket where we're holding the recycle records, and we're going to replay them during what we call the recycle playback or drop-off period. So those are the terms. And if you click on the edit icon or the create icon while you're on a cell that has one, it will allow you to edit that. So you could make a change and say, well, let's drop this one down to only 5 hours. So you can do that. If you want to delete one, you click on that period, click X, and or the X with the recycle symbol. That'll delete just this one. If you want to delete all of the recycle periods on this for this category completely, click on the big X, and it will remove them all. And then you can go to, remember to go to, if you want to stop recycling, remember to go to all your categories and delete them from all your categories. Otherwise you're going to have, see, I just deleted it from one there. Let's just delete them all. Okay. That's basically the gold recycling in a nutshell. So now we're going to move on. And see, I had made a lot of changes, but I really got myself back to where I started from by deleting them all. And yet MusicMaster still knows that I made some changes during this session, and so it asks me, would you like to save your changes first? I'm going to say no because I didn't really make any, and I don't want to keep them. Let's go back to that turnover analysis screen. We're going to take a look at this crazy database here. This is wild. We've got an oldies database with thousands of songs. You can see 742 songs in the A category, 7,000, 9,000, 6,000. This is quite a few records. And the rotations are very slow, 60 days. But let's say that let's take the recycle idea of, well, I don't want to waste a record in overnight because it might take a year before somebody hears that record again. Let's take that whole idea and say to ourselves, well, I don't want to really waste any records in here. I may be playing way too many records because the records that I am playing, if it's a great record, it's only going to be heard. A great song is only going to be heard every 60 days. That's a long time. I would like my audience to have a chance to hear these records before they go away for a while. And this, in the past, people had thought about doing this manually by taking a big chunk of records out of the category and putting them to in rest for a while. And then what would happen is they would go periodically manually go in and take a bunch of the resting records, put them into the active category, and move a bunch of records back out in order to basically make the active category smaller and cycle in and out a bunch of records that had been resting for a while. And this was referred to in many different terms. Some people called it bicycling, some people called it platooning. And in MusicMaster, we came up with a way to do this automatically. And we kind of expanded on the idea. We use it for several different purposes. And one of them is to control the composition of your library to help solve some scheduling problems. And that's what I'm going to focus on first. First I'm going to focus on that, and then I'll show you some other things that can be done with it. To start off with, let's find an imaginary problem. Let's say that we go to the Mars category, and we'll sort by artist, and we've got all kinds of crazy stuff in here. But let's go down and say, we've been having a problem because we've got too many songs in this category by the Beatles. And the problem with this is that in this category, the Beatles songs are never getting played because there's so many songs by the Beatles in the A's and the B's and the C's that when we finally get down to the D's, which is a later category to be scheduled, there's just no place to play all these. They basically are bunching up at the front of the stack, and it's very difficult to find a place for them to fall into. So their rotations are getting pretty much destroyed by the fact that we've got too many. But we don't want to go in here, let's say we don't want to go in and take these songs out. But what we'd like to do is to reduce the number of Beatles songs that are active in this category at any given time. That sounds like a pretty cool thing to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the platooning thing, but I'm going to show you how you would set that up if you were going to do it manually first. First, I would create a rest category. So we go to Library, Categories, and we make a new category, Add. And we're going to call this BDR, Beatles Rest in D. And it sounds sort of like maybe a classical piece, but it's not. It's Beatles Rest in D. It's a music category. We'll just add that. We won't bother giving it a color, but it shows up on our list here of categories on the info bar. So now we're going to take the Beatle records, and first thing we're going to do is find out, well, how many of them do we have? A quick way to do this would be to go into the query box. We've got category D, and we'll just say, let's just do performers, which is the keyword for artist separation in this database, and then contains, and then we pull this down and find the Beatle records. So what we're going to do is we're just going to isolate all the Beatle records that are in category D. This is going to take a second because it has to build an index for all the artists that are in this category. But the idea here is we're going to take some of these songs, we're going to put them into rest. We're going to then take the number of Beatles records that are active, drop them down. So let's go down here and find the Beatles. And if you're playing this many records, you got to reconsider how many records you're playing. So we go in here and say Add, and OK, and we're playing. And you see at the bottom in the status box, it says we're playing 71 Beatles records in the D category. Okay, so I'm thinking to myself, I'd like to get that down to a really reasonable number. Let's try to get it down to like 10 records. How about? So what we're going to do is select all of them by clicking in the box at the upper left-hand corner, just above the pointer column for the first record. Click there and it selects them all. Then I'm going to hit the Control key and I'm going to click on 10 of them to remove them from the list. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now we've selected 61, we've got 71. That's 10 that are unselected. We're going to grab on the pointer bar where we've got a selected record, and we're going to drag that over to Beatles Rest in D and move those Beatles songs into the rest category. Okay, now if I were manually platooning or bicycling, I would be done, because now I've reduced the number of Beatles songs that are in the active D category, and I'd have to come in here every once in a while, let's say every week, and I would grab 10 different Beatles records and put them in D and take the 10 that were active and put them to rest. And I'd have to maybe on a separate piece of paper somewhere keep track of which ones I moved in and out, so I'd make sure that I cycled through all of them. Now what's cool is in MusicMaster you don't need to do that, because we can do this automatically. We've got the setup finished, but we can use Auto-Platoon to handle this for us. So what we're going to do is take a look at that. Go to Dataset, Schedule, Auto-Platoon, and now what we're going to do is say we're going to add, we don't have any right now. There's no Auto-Platoons in this database at the moment, but we're going to add a new one. And we're going to say we want to take songs from the D category, and we want them to be resting in our BDR, Beatles Rest in D category. We don't want all the songs to platoon, so we want to put a filter on. And here we want to say the filter is performers, and we can change this to equals or contains, doesn't matter, but let's just say we put it in here as Beatles, and we add that. So what we're basically saying is the ones we want to platoon in and out are the ones where the performer is Beatles. The others that don't match this filter will not be touched. And we click OK, and we also have to, we might want to apply the filter in both directions, and that would be if we were going to use this rest category for resting other artists. Let's say we found out, hey, this is working great for the Beatles, I think I want to do the same thing for the Beach Boys or somebody else. So what you'd do is you'd apply the filter in both directions, so that you would not only be taking Beatles records out of the D category and resting them, you would also be bringing only Beatles records back in with this particular platoon. So we're going to schedule how often this happens. We already know the amount. We want to move 10 of them. Now we don't have to move 10 of them. 10 means we're going to take every single one, but let's do 10 for now. But 10 means we're going to take every single one that's active, throw it off into rest, and bring 10 rested records back to replace them. And we're going to do this, and what did I say I wanted to do it? Like, let's say every week. Every week I want to do this. In this case, that would be a little crazy because the category rotation is so slow. I'd want to do it maybe on a much longer basis. So we'd want to go to like every month. See, you've got a lot of different options here in this scheduler. You can say I want to do this every month on the 15th of the month, or every other month on the 15th of the month. Well, let's say that we want to do this weekly, every third week on Wednesday. So that's basically setting up the schedule. Every week, or let's say every other week on Wednesday, we're going to do this. Basically, we're finished here, and we can click OK, and we've added this Auto-Platoon. What it's doing is it's taking all 10 of these active Beatle records every other week on Wednesday. And this, by the way, is not based on the calendar or your system time on your computer. This is based on when you auto-schedule these days. So every other week when it goes to schedule Wednesday, it's going to say, I have a job to do. I have to auto-platoon. So it's going to take the 10 Beatle records that are active, move those to BDR, move those to rest. It's going to take the 10 Beatle records that have been in the BDR category the longest, the ones that have rested the longest, and it's going to bring those back to the D1 category to replace the ones that are moving out. So I'm going to be cycling chunks of 10 Beatle records at a time every other week. This is exactly what I want to do. And I can also go in, let's go back to edit this, and there's a button here called Analysis. And Analysis will tell me a little bit about what's happening. I'm taking 10 records based on the setup that I just did. I've got 10 available Beatle records in the primary category. That's my D1. I have 61 Beatle records in the rest category. Well, we knew that because we worked on this together. Now it tells me the approximate number of days for one song to cycle out and back. That's 112 days. So I know that about it once every almost 4 months, one of these Beatles songs, like Do You Want to Know a Secret, is going to go away, and then it's going to come back again. It's going to take 4 months for that to happen. And the number of days for the primary category, the whole thing to cycle out and back again, is 112. And that's because we're moving chunks of 10, and there are only 10 active records, so those numbers match. Now let's do something a little smarter. Let's say that we're going to do the same thing, but instead of moving all 10 of them, let's only move half of them at a time. And so what happens here is the 5 Beatle records that have been active the longest are going to go to rest. And 5 Beatle records that have rested the longest are going to come back to life, and they're going to take their place. And the next week, we're going to take the other 5 Beatle records, the ones that have now been active the longest, rest them, and bicycle or platoon back in 5 records to take their place. We could also do this with some odd number, like 3, so that the active Beatle record titles are constantly changing. What's active as a Beatle record is always different. And basically, though, on a regular basis, we're getting a different mix. But at any given time, in our D category, no matter how we set this up, we'll always have 10 active Beatle records. And what's cool about this is that, let's say later you decide, oh, well, I think I'm not playing enough Beatles tracks. Well, if you want to add some more, you can just throw them into the rest category. And you're not increasing the number of active Beatle records that you have. You're just adding more to the pool that there is in rest to be platooned in and out of the active rotation. So this is how you do this for Beatles. Now let's say we talked about how maybe we want to do this for Beach Boys too. You could do the same thing. And what you'd basically do is go back to D1, you'd get your Beach Boys records, and instead of creating a rest category, you could put them in this same category as long as you remember to set the filter up so that it looks both ways. The Beach Boys will replace Beach Boys, Beatles will replace Beatles, and this will go on. And you could do this for, let's think about it. You can do this for artists like we're doing here, or you could do it for songs that are slow records, because maybe you've got way too many slow records and they're bunching up, and you want to reduce. You don't want to take these songs off the air, but you want to reduce the number of active slow records in a particular category. Auto-platooning is great for that. Maybe your whole radio station is leaning too much to a certain sound type, or it's leaning too much to a certain era, and you want to reduce the number of songs from that sound, with that sound code or with that era that are active at any given moment, but you don't want to remove the titles. Auto-platooning can do that for you. It's basically all handled the same way using the filters that we just saw. So auto-platooning is a great way of controlling the rotation of individual artists, individual songs by type or era or tempo or whatever criteria you want. It's also a great way for you to mix in some songs that are like oh wow records that you're not normally playing, but by setting up the schedule to handle those records and slowly filter them in and out of active rotation, you could have maybe 1,000 records that you basically have resting, and every once in a while you're pulling a few of those into the active rotation, letting them play for a little while, and then putting them back to sleep. So it's like a rotation within a rotation, and in fact the way you could set it up is multiple rotations in and out of your active category. So let's take another look at how this could be done, how things can be done in here with this. I'm going to take all these Beatle records, I'm going to disassemble the auto-platooning session that we just created. And by the way, this Rolling Stones record got in here because the Beatles were playing along with the Rolling Stones on that record. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the entire rest category, just move it back into D. And we just move them back into D. Now our Beatles rest category is empty. And then the last step of this is to go into schedule auto-platoon, and we're going to delete that platoon job. Okay. Now let's just go back again once more to the turnover analysis screen. And I'm the consultant who walked into this radio station this morning, and I looked over their database, and it's now evening of the second day, and I'm have made some decisions. You guys are playing way too many records. Your rotations are way, way, way too slow. And we need to speed this up. And we're going to hack out a lot of records, you know, maybe half, maybe more than half the records. And all of a sudden we say, well, wait a second. You know, these records all tested well. We started out with a universe of 50,000 records, and we pared this down already to only 20% of the top cream of the crop records. Okay, sure you did. Well, what we're going to do, though, is we're still going to cut those records down, but we're going to leave the titles on the air. We're just going to make sure that the active categories are smaller and rotating faster so that your audience has a chance to hear the records that you're playing, these great tested records. So let's create, right now, we'll create some auto-platooning for the B, C, and D categories to get these down to a more reasonable size. 7,000, 9,000, 6,000, that's going to be history. I've sat down as a consultant and I figured out that let's start with D. We have about to cut that in half. Instead of in D 6,567, I really like to get down to 3,233. Okay. Well, we can go down here. This is a real interesting tool. You can go down here to slot count and say, well, if I want to play 3,233, excuse me, I could just type that in here and hit enter. And I get what the rotation will look like if I were to go to this number of songs here. I also see that instead of a 142-day rotation that I had before, I would now have a 70-day rotation for my Ds. Hey, I'm liking that. That's a lot better than almost a year. So I also see over to the right of this that I would have to lose 3,299 songs to get to the 3,233 target record count. So it's a very handy little tool here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lose 3,299 songs from D. And to do that, I'll just leave this screen open because I may use it again. Let's go to the dataset library, and we're going to go to categories and make a new one. And this one we're going to call D2, resting D1s. And resting D1s is a category now and on my list. And oh, while I was in there, you know, I think I'm going to just clean up my act here and take this resting Beatles one and delete that category. So you're seeing some cool toys here. Resting D1s, now I need to go and get 3,299 of them. Let's go in here, and what we're going to do is select one here. We're going to go about halfway down the category because we know that's about right with the slider. And then we're going to hit Shift and hold it down and click on the pointer bar, and we've selected a bunch of records. You see that? So now we've got 3,639 selected, and we're pretty close now to how many we needed to get rid of, which was 3,299. We kind of overshot a little bit. So let's go up here and try this again. And we just shift and click on there, and now we're at 3,303. So we're getting pretty close. In fact, we're awfully close. And we can just control-click to remove individual songs like this. And what we need is 3,299. Well, I went too far. And there we go. Now we've got 3,299 Ds. We don't care which ones they are because they're all going to play. We're just going to take these 3,299 Ds and we're going to drag those over into rest. Now some consultants would be tempted to drag those into the dumpster, delete those records altogether, and you know, maybe that's a philosophical question. Should we delete the records or should we keep on playing them and bicycle them in and out? In this particular case, after a very long debate between the consultant, the general manager, and the program director, it was determined that we're going to play all these titles, but we're going to bicycle them or auto-platoon them. And we're moving a ton of records here, so it's going to take a little time. But after we're done doing this, we will have the correct number of records in our D1 rotation. And the next step of this is going to be to set up the auto-platoon numbers so that we end up recycling these records in and out. So now we have to think about what speed do we want to move these records? And basically this is the thing that's going to help us make this decision is going to be mainly that analysis tool that's in the auto-platooning screen. But we decided we're going to start out thinking about this, that every other week we're going to move some records out and replace them with some fresh rested records. And we think about it and we say, well, we also want to figure out how many we want to move every other week. So every other week we've decided we want to move 150 of them. We're just going to start with that as a starting point. So we're going to take 150 records from rest, put them into the active category, take 150 active ones that have been active the longest, throw those into rest. Very cool. Now on your radio station, by the way, this will still work even though you're not playing tens of thousands of records. I mean, if you're only playing 200 gold records, it might still make perfect sense for you to get that down to 80 or 90 gold records and recycle and platoon the in and out those extra tracks so that you're basically speeding up the rotation of those songs and throwing in a sub-rotation that's giving you that oh wow kick every once in a while. But let's go in now and set this up. We'll go to Dataset, Schedule, Auto-Platoon, and now we want to add, now this time, our active category is D1. Our rest category here is resting D1s. And this time, we don't need a filter because we're going to move any song. So it's not just the Beatles songs that we're moving, now it's any song. So we don't really need a filter at this point. But we do want that schedule, and we want to know how many to move each time. So we determined 150 are going to move, and we're going to move those every week on Sunday. So let's go to weekly, every week on Sunday, done. Now there was also a thing in here where you could say when this starts. So you could begin the auto-platooning sometime in the future if you'd like. So you do have a scheduler to begin this. Now once it begins, it's going to basically keep going until you go in and shut it off or make changes. At any time you can go in here and change the timing, the filter, the count, whatever you like. So you can adjust this after you get it started. Let's do a little analysis and see what's going on here. It says that and we've got 3,263 songs in the primary category. We've got 3,304 in the rest. We're going to move 150 of them. It's going to take 168 days for one song to play all through its cycle, go into rest, and then come back to life again. It's going to take almost a year for the entire category to have cycled out and come back again. So every song will have had it shot on the air completely in 315 days. And so we basically say, that's not bad, so we'll just live with that. Now when I go to my D1 category, instead of being, 6,400 songs, now we're down to 3,263 songs. Now if I go to turnover analysis and I refresh this, you click on the icon on the bottom here with the two arrows chasing each other, and that's your refresh screen. Now you'll see that we're down to a 70-day turnover for the D1s. And the resting Ds, they're not playing. There's a few thousand of those that are off the air, but we know that some of these, 150 of them to be exact, every week are going to go into D, and 150 of the songs that have been in D1 the longest are going to go out to make space for them. The size of my D1 category will not change. The rotation of my D1 category will not change, but the titles that are being played in there will have a subtle change every week. There'll be 150 new records in there that nobody's heard for, a few months and several months. And then there'll be 150 records that people have been hearing for almost a year that will go to sleep. Now this is all very cool. And I'm sure if your wheels are turning, you're thinking, well, I don't have numbers like this, but I can sure use this, and I can use this another way. I hope that's what you're thinking, because that was what I was trying to get to here. Now, I'm going to show you, before we go here, one other way that this can be used. We're going to go to the B1 category. And in the B1 category, I've added to my entire database, but I've added a field called core. And this is a yes-no type of field. So I basically get a checkbox on my screen, and I can check it on or off. And in this database, I have taken certain records, and I said these records are the most important records in this category, so I check them on. And if I sort by core, I can see that I've got quite a few that come to the top of the list that are the core records. I want to only auto-platoon. Sorry, that went off the screen there, but I want to auto-platoon only the ones that are not checked on. The ones that I have a checkbox on, the core records, these, I don't want those to platoon. So let's set up a platoon for this. We're going to go to Dataset, Library, Categories quickly. We will add a category called B2, Resting B1s. And we will then use that category to take a whole bunch of B1s. I'm not even going to bother to work the math. I've sorted by core. I'm going to select from the bottom here, scroll a ways up, shift click, and see that I've selected about 2,800 of these. I'm going to pull those over here into my resting B1. And now I can use that filter box that we saw when we did the auto-platoon setup for the Ds, which I didn't use when I set up the Ds, but I did use that box when we were platooning Beatles records. Remember? It was basically I only want to platoon the ones that have the performer equals Beatles. Well, now all I have to do is say I only want to platoon the ones where the core box is not checked on. So we'll do that. And as soon as this is finished, we'll do it. We also have to think about, well, how many of these do we want to cycle in and out, and how often do we want to do it? And so we think about really the right way to do this is to sit down, think about the math, think about what your rotations are now, where you'd like to get them to be, how fast you'd like to speed up that category. Basically use the turnover analysis tool to kind of dial in the turnover that you want, and then that will tell you how many songs you need to get rid of to speed the rotation up to what your target is, what you've determined is the ideal, for that category. Now you know how many songs to move out of the system into rest to get the rotation that you want. And then the next trick is, how many do we move? Well, you go into Dataset, Schedule, Auto-Platoon, and we just create a new one, Add. And we're going to go take B1 as our primary category. That's our active category. And our rest category is B1 resting. Now, I'm going to stop here and point out something. And we've only got a minute or two left, so I want to go fast here. This doesn't have to be a rest category. You can actually take songs from a active category and cycle them in and out of a slower rotation active category. It doesn't have to be just going to sleep. You might have some of the Bs going and becoming Ds and then coming back again. It's basically your choice, but you have to use the filter to kind of control that if that's what you're doing. Let's put the filter on. Basically what we're going to do here is say we want core is false. That means the box is not checked. Those are the only ones I want to platoon. Anything where the box is checked on, those are not going to platoon. Those are going to stay put. It's the ones that are not the core songs that are going to platoon. And now I'm going to add one more filter because I'm going to say, I don't really want a song to cycle out of rotation until it's had a chance to play once. So I can go down here to Category Plays, and I can say Category Plays is greater than 0. And I can add that in, and I can say must match all, which means that in order to platoon, in order to qualify to platoon, it has to be a non-core record, and it has to have played at least once while it was in the active category. Okay, then all you have to do is add my schedule, which I've determined was, well, let's say we're going to move 66 of them every other day. Okay, and then we go over here and make the amount 66, run the analysis and see where we're at. Now it says available songs in the primary category 425. That actually means there are 425 songs in the B1 category that do not have the checkbox turned on because the filter is applied. So you have to remember this is applying only to what's going to happen, and the auto-platoon knows that it can't move those core records. So there are 425 records that are active at any given time that are non-core. We've got 2,867 non-core records that are resting at any given time. We're moving 66 of them every other day. It's going to take about 3 months for one song to cycle out and back again. and it's going to take about 12 extra days, almost two weeks longer, for the entire category of just the non-core ones in this category to have completely cycled out and cycled back in again. And voila, we have auto-platooning. And it's now 1:57, and I actually managed to cover everything that I wanted to cover today. I hope that you've got an idea how this works. But if you are at all interested in setting this up on your station, but your numbers are completely different than what you've seen here, that's understandable. This is an insane database. If you've got a more normal radio database, then and you need some help with it, be sure to call your music scheduling consultant, and they'll walk you through this. Mark, I turn it over to you.